Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll implement wishlist feature. Let's go ahead and create a new module. As usual, new module, choose Android library. I'm gonna call it wishlist feature. Add here domain because we're going to start with domain. Copy this, paste it here, and you are good to go. As usual, we have to fix some stuff and we have to configure the feature. Delete these two lines, switch to project, click on build.gradle.kts, delete everything from here. We're going to customize this Gradle file. Basically, with the same manner, we will need Android library, Kotlin Android, and we have to apply the shared Gradle plugins. And for the dependencies, we need here actually just the core module as well as health for dependency injection. And our module is ready to go. Switch back to Android, click on the domain or Kotlin, and let's create the usual packages repository and the other package, which is the use case. And the repository creates a new interface, call it wishlist repository. Toggle wishlist will take in parameter user ID, products ID, and long, indicating that if -1, we have removed the products from wishlist other than -1, the related wishlist item ID. Get entire wishlist. This function will get a flow of resource of list of wishlist item, basically a stream of data. Now let's define the use cases. As usual, nothing substantial. Toggle wishlist use case and get entire wishlist use case. I'm gonna provide the two use cases as well as the data class grouping the two use cases. Just an overview, get entire wishlist. We will inject in the constructor the repository and to override the operator invoke to make this instance of this particular class invocable. Likewise for toggle wishlist use case, and the entire use cases grouped under the data class wishlist use cases. And that's pretty much it for the domain layer. Let's go ahead and add another module under wishlist, new module. It will be the data layer. Android library, copy this, paste it here, and hit finish. Switch back to project, under data, build gradle.plugin, delete everything from here, as well as under Android, and dependencies. As usual, we need Android library and Kotlin Android. We need to apply the shared Gradle plugin, and we need core and health for dependency injection. I'm going to sync the projects for now. Switch back to Android, and we have to add the dependency or the implementation for the domain layer. Let's go back to the build source, features library, create here a new Kotlin file. Let's call it wishlist feature dependencies. We need to define wishlist feature domain. This is basically the implementation for wishlist domain, and another implementation for the Android test implementation for the data layer, and another implementation for data layer, domain layer, and presentation layer. That's all we have for the dependencies under wishlist feature dependencies. In the list, wishlist, and let's add the other dependencies. We need data module Android test implementation, pass the projects as an argument, and we need wishlist feature domain layer. I'm gonna add here room database, and we are good to go. Let's go ahead under the data layer, create a new package here, call it repository. And the repository, wishlist repository implementation. We need as dependencies in this particular implementation, the database, the API service, as well as the crypto service, because this particular implementation is going to deal with private API endpoints. And we have to implement the wishlist repository. And let's add here the list of those that we're going to interact with. And let's implement the first one, which is toggle wishlist. This is basically a suspending function. We're not going to deal with flows this time. First of all, we have to check if we have a cached authenticated user. Basically, what we are doing here is just simulating the active session. Just the first emission, and because it's nullable, if it's null, we're going to throw this particular error. And the message, let's say for example, no user found. Now we have the cached user, we can safely get and decrypt the token. Crypto service, decrypt token. If there is an error, we're just gonna throw the error. For the API call, I'm gonna start it under response. The method in question is get. It's going to return wishlist response DTO that we have done before under core module. And we have to assign to provide the URL as well as the headers. For the URL, we need to provide the products ID And for the headers, we need to assign the bearer token. The first case, if the wishlist ID equal -1, and the other case, we will do wishlist, and we have to delete the wishlist item from the database or from the cached user data. Now, the other case, we need to add this particular wishlist item to the list of wishlist. Wishlist insert wishlist. First data that we have to provide is the ID, product ID, and the user ID. At the end, we're going to return response and the inserted wishlist item ID. This is very simple. Now for the last one, which is get entire wishlist, it will return a flow. We need to check if we have a cached authenticated user. Now, if the cached user is null, we're going to emit a resource of type error with an API error exception to finish the emission of the flow. Basically, this whole section serves as an early return. And initially, we're going to send the user the old cache under the loading state. We'll send to the user cached wishlist, and we're going to map it to wishlist item. This gives a good user experience if you want to show the old cache while the API call is in progress, then refresh the cache afterward. If you get a problem, we're going to emit a resource of type error, pass in the exception as an error. First of all, we're going to decrypt the token in order to make the API call. Next, we'll make the API call and pass in the bearer token. Now we got the list or the new list from calling the API call. We can right now proceed by deleting all the wishlist items in order to refresh the wishlist with the newly created data. The same thing as we have done under user, just going to do the same thing here. For each wishlist item, we're going to save the related products as well as the related images and insert the product. After inserting the product detail, we're going to insert the wishlist item. Now we are done with caching the data. We need to emit some data to the user. We will use the function emit all. Basically, we're going to emit cached user with wishlist to wishlist item. Let's add here a parameter. I'm going to call it data. And we need to pass here the data. And because it's nullable, we're going to access the wishlist and we have to convert it to wishlist item model. And because it's nullable, we don't want to serve null data. We're going to return the data from the API call. And that's pretty much it for the get entire wishlist. As you can see here, we're going to serve the same stream to the user. The next step is to define the module for dependency injection. Under the I, create a new object, call it wishlist feature domain module. Annotate these objects with module and install in singleton component. As usual, we need to show Hilt how to provide the repository implementation as well as the use cases. With the same manner, return wishlist use cases, providing the use cases and passing in the arguments the repository from the parameter. That's all we have actually for the wishlist feature domain module. Now it's time for testing. As usual, under Android test, the repository, let's add here a class implementation test. We need an instance of the wishlist repository implementation mock API service, the database, and the crypto service. And we need to interact with the data. Therefore, I'm going just to provide here the list of DAOs. As usual, we need to initialize those needed dependencies and needed instances under the setup function. And at the end, we will have the repository implementation instance. Now, the first test that we have to do is toggle wishlist should remove product from user wishlist. As usual, we have to arrange. Let's set the product's ID to 1, for example, matching the product's sunglasses. And the user from the mock data. First of all, going to insert something in our database. To do that, we're going to use the user DAO and call insert user. Right now, we're still under the arrangement of the testing. I'm going to add here the product, a product model. Now let's insert this product in the database and we need to insert its related images. Then we need to insert the wishlist in the database. Now we need to act. Basically, we're going to call the method toggle wishlist from the repository implementation. Let's store it under response, ID as an argument, and the user ID. For the assertion, we're going to assert that the response equal -1, indicating that we have deleted an item. Now we need to make sure that the item is completely removed from the database. Let's store the wishlist from the database under wishlist, and we can call wishlist DAO get wishlist, providing the user ID, and access only the first emission. For the assertion, we need to make sure that it does not exist. So we're gonna do assert false, and we will use any parameter or any function wishlist item equal product ID. This is going to return true if the product is found, otherwise false. That's all for the test. Let's run the test. And the test passed. Thank you. Now for the other tests, we need to make sure that toggle wishlist should add product to user wishlist. First of all, going to get the product, for example, from the list of the products or available products. Let's get just the product ID. We need the user from the mock data, and let's insert the user as usual. I'm just gonna copy this section here, and we're going to act. I'm gonna start the response under this value response, repository implementation, toggle wishlist. As usual, pass in the arguments product ID as well as user ID from user DTO. For the assertion, we're going to make sure that the response is the same as the inserted wishlist item ID that we have defined under mock data. If you ask me why we have done this assertion, let's come back to the wishlist mock request handler. To simulate toggling wishlist on and off, we have stored, first of all, the updated wishlist, and we have filtered by the product ID to simulate basically deleting and adding. If we are deleting, we're going to return -1. If we are adding, we're just going to return something to the response, and basically that thing which is the inserted wishlist item ID. That's pretty much the principle. Now, let's make sure that we have the data inserted in our database. Therefore, I'm going to create here, as usual, wishlist, and we can access the wishlist by calling wishlist.DAO and get wishlist, passing into arguments the user ID, and we're going to access only the first emission. This time around, we're going to assert true. Wishlist item exists under our wishlist. Any, it referring to the wishlist item, equal product ID. Let's run the test. And the test passed. Now we need to simulate other cases. For example, if the user is not authenticated and able to access this particular function, toggle wishlist, we need to protect this one. Let's run the test and to see if it's protected in this particular case. I need the product ID and the user ID, and we need to act. Surround this block with try catch. Under the try block, we're going to call a repository and toggle wishlist as usual. The assertion is gonna happen here inside the catch block. We're just gonna make sure that assert true, the exception is of type API error. Let's run the test. And the test passed. The key here is we're not going to insert any data in the database. We have inserted the user data, simulating that the user has logged in. Therefore, we have the data inserted in the database, so we can access the GWT token. In this particular section, we haven't inserted anything in the database. Therefore, there is no GWT token to attach to the bearer token. The other function that we have to test, which is the last test for this particular section, gets entire wishlist should get the entire user wishlist with images. I'm going to make sure that we have the integrity of data. First of all, let's arrange the user DTO. Let's insert the user DTO, simulating that we have an active user. We need the product to insert. Now let's insert the products as well as the images and the wishlist items for this particular user. Now we can act. Let's do repository and get entire wishlist, pass here the user ID, and we have to use turbine. Val loading state. The first assertion, we're going to make sure that we are under the loading state. The next assertion, we're going to make sure that we have some data, assert not null, loading state, and data. Next assertion, we want to make sure that the list of data is not empty. We can safely use this operator. After this assertion, we are now 100% sure that the data is not null. Now for the next one, we need to make sure that the list of data or the old cache matches the data that we have inserted in the database. Therefore, we're going to loop over the data, and because it's null, we're going to do just for each. I'm going to call this parameter item. If the item and product ID equal product ID, we're going to assert that the item.product detail is not null. Basically, we have the product detail inserted in our database. You can add here other assertions if you will, but for simplicity purposes, if this passed, we have the data in our database. After for loop, create here a value, call it success state. For the first assertion, we need to make sure that we are under success state. And again, we need to make sure that the data is not null and the list of wishlist items is not empty and the data is not null. Basically the same thing that we have done here. At the bottom, we're going to cancel and ignore remaining events. That's all for this test. Let's try to run the test. This test case might be not enough for some of you, but for me, it's more than enough for this tutorial. You can add, as I said before, other assertions to make sure that we have the same data. But basically, if this data is not null, we can say for certainty that we have some data to serve to the client or to the view model. And it's a good practice actually to run the whole test in order to check that the test does not interfere with each other. And the whole thing passed with green flag color. That's basically it. For the next tutorial, we're going to implement the presentation layer and we're going to run integration tests for the view model. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one and happy coding.